I was raised as someone who has passion for history, but I wouldn't describe myself as a professional historian today. Throughout my journey, I delved deep into the annals of the past. Yet, amidst the tales of conquests and civilizations, I stumbled upon a hidden enigma, which is that the warriors of Islam, in particular, are unlike those of other nations. If we dig deep into history, we will find that the Latin hero Bolivar fought against the Spanish Empire. The Vietnamese rebel Ho Chi Minh took on the American Empire. Before them, the Carthaginian leader Hannibal faced off against the Roman Empire. But there's something special about heroes in the Islamic world. They're the only ones who fought against multiple empires at the same time. As we saw in the previous video how the Prince al-Khattabi fought against France, Spain, and England all at the same time, now it's time to talk about a man who fought against not one, not two, but many empires together. He had to deal with the French Empire, the British Empire, the Italian Empire, and even some Zionist gangs all at once. France wanted to execute him. Italy chased him because he supported a revolution led by Omar al-Mukhtar in Libya, and he became the #1 target for the British forces. He was also the main enemy of the Zionist Haganah gangs. This man spent his youth fighting against these powerful enemies, and each one of them aimed to defeat this Syrian legend. He was known as the leader, Izz ad-Din al-Qassam. The story of today is about an exceptional hero in the great Islamic nation. We are speaking of a man who awakened the spirit of resistance in Muslims after a long slumber. We are talking about the pioneer of the first Palestinian revolution, the Lion of Islam, the courageous hero, the fearless and brilliant leader. We're talking about the instigator of the al-Qassam revolution, the hero Izz ad-Din al-Qassam. And the beginning, like most heroes of the Islamic nation, starts from the mosques in the town of Jabla, the province of Latakia in Syria. Izz ad-Din al-Qassam was born in the year 1882 to learn in the mosques of that Syrian town. He lived a normal childhood in a religiously committed environment, and his father was keen on educating him to hold a respectable position. However, in the year 1889, when our hero was 7 years old, the Ottoman Empire was in a state of attrition war and had control over all of these regions, including Syria. Among the laws of the Ottoman Empire was compulsory conscription. And so, in this specific year, 1889, Ottoman soldiers took al-Qassam's older brother to Yemen's war. But unfortunately, he never came back. And because of that, when Izz ad-Din al-Qassam turned 14 years old, his father immediately sent him to Egypt to complete his studies at Al-Azhar University in 1896. What's interesting is at that time and place, there were big names influencing the environment where al-Qassam was studying, including Muhammad Abdu, Jamal ad-Din al-Afghani, and Muhammad Rashid Rida. All of these individuals came together with a shared call to resist the occupation and not surrender, despite limited resources. Izz ad-Din al-Qassam spent 8 formative years among these like-minded individuals. Then, in 1906, he returned to his hometown and worked as an imam, a preacher, and a Quran teacher. Over the course of just 5 years, his influence grew exponentially, drawing a devoted following and a legion of supporters to his steadfast principles. In a remarkable turn of events, when Italy occupied the land of Libya in 1911, Izz ad-Din al-Qassam stepped out in protest in front of his mosque after Friday prayers, expressing his opinion that denounced that occupation. What's truly astonishing is that he was accompanied by only a handful of people. To his amazement, these minority protesters quickly turned into a massive gathering, denouncing the occupation vociferously, and his reaction was one of sheer astonishment, as he did not expect what happened in front of him. When Izz ad-Din al-Qassam saw the huge crowds gathering behind him, he realized that the Italian fleet wouldn't simply leave because of the protesters. So, what he decided to do next was truly surprising. The Italian occupation began to delve deeper into the Arab country Libya, and on the other side, Our hero and his companions expressed their opinions about the total rejection of this occupation. Al-Qassam knew that praying and gathering would not change anything. But the large people who came together in the protest shifted his view from protesting to physically help Libya get rid of the occupation. So, he gathered 250 of his followers and they headed to the coast of Iskandaruna in the city of Antalya on the Turkish coast in the Mediterranean Sea. And there, they secretly made an agreement with a ship to take them to Libya to help the Libyan people stand against the Italian fleet. But unfortunately, the ship was destroyed before it could reach them, as they waited for its arrival for 40 days on the Turkish coast. After that, al-Qassam and his group were forced to return to Syria again. In 1916, with the beginning of the collapse of the Ottoman Empire, the Sykes-Picot Agreement was concluded between the two countries, France and Britain. This agreement effectively divided the Ottoman provinces into areas of British and French control and influence. France occupied the Syrian and Lebanese coasts in 1918, and of course these coasts included Latakia and Jabla, where Izz ad-Din al-Qassam and his companions lived. From the first day of the emergence of this colonialism, Izz ad-Din al-Qassam sold his house and used the money to prepare for the resistance. On the second day, he started talking to people, telling them he was with the resistance and stood at the front line. People believed him and trusted him, and from that day, he formed his own special group. At the beginning of 1920, Izz ad-Din al-Qassam led the revolution against the French in Syria, and surprisingly, he caused a lot of trouble for the French and made them suffer. Camps were burned, French equipment was destroyed, in addition to heavy human losses on the French side. At one point, his followers asked him, "How can we defeat an army as big as France when we only have a few light equipment?" He replied with his wise saying, "It is not important for us to win. What's important is that we become a lesson for the nation and future generations." Our hero, Izz ad-Din al-Qassam, was sentenced to death in absentia by the French authorities. And then, the French tightened its forces on the resistance area of Jabla, which led our hero to move to another area called Al-Hafa, specifically near Salah ad-Din Castle. However, his move was not to hide from the eyes of the occupiers, but to increase the pace of resistance. His wife went out to collect donations and to bring volunteers who want to join the resistance. On the other hand, al-Qassam's group gathered tools and resources and trained the Syrian people, both men and women, for armed resistance against the French occupation. Izz ad-Din al-Qassam hurt the French, to the point that the French authorities attempted to bribe and honor him with a judicial position, while canceling his death sentence. However, this hero rejected everything the colonialists offered, and only sought one thing: complete independence for his country. Unfortunately, his reward was a new death sentence issued by the Syrian customary court, and the French pursued him. As a result, al-Qassam fled from Syria and was chased until he succeeded in reaching the city of Haifa in Palestine in 1921. You might be thinking that this man was just a coward who kept running away from one place to another. But what's astonishing is that at that time, Palestine was under British occupation. Furthermore, if we go back 3 years to 1917, we would find that an agreement known as the Balfour Declaration had been concluded, which states that the Zionists will have a homeland in Palestine, and this means that our hero Izz ad-Din al-Qassam chose this place intentionally and carefully, as he was fully aware of what he would do later. The Palestinian city of Haifa was not just a hiding place. It was a strategic decision made with a purpose, for something big yet to come. The leader, Izz ad-Din al-Qassam, worked as a teacher in Palestine until 1925, when al-Istiqlal Mosque was built in Haifa. This hero became the imam and preacher of the mosque, which was the largest mosque in the city of Haifa. As soon as he started working inside al-Istiqlal Mosque, his Syrian's experience repeated itself, where people began to listen to him, convey his words, and introduce each other to him to the extent that his reputation spread in Haifa and the surrounding cities. Anticipate the upcoming Zionist danger. Britain has no right to promise anything to the Zionists. Britain is just an occupier, like the Zionists. These were the messages that Izz ad-Din al-Qassam directed to his followers and the people who listened to him. On one Friday, Izz ad-Din al-Qassam was delivering a sermon at al-Istiqlal Mosque in front of a crowd that filled the mosque to its brim. Among this large gathering, there were individuals loyal to the British authorities who heard what our hero had to say. Consequently, he was arrested on the same night. On the morning of Saturday, the British colonialists were taken by surprise as a massive crowd filled the city of Haifa and its surroundings, referred to at that time as the Walking Palestine. The British were not prepared for any confrontations, so they immediately released Izz ad-Din al-Qassam. Following this, al-Qassam established secret cells for the Palestinian popular resistance. His call resonated not only with patriots and nationalists, but also reached non-Muslim individuals who found themselves drawn to his cause. In the early 1930s, Zionist gangs began to emerge in Palestine, and some enthusiastic young Palestinian men wanted to start fighting. However, the leader, Izz ad-Din al-Qassam, chose to delay the declaration of the major revolution. In his view, matters should not be driven by emotions, but by careful and organized preparation. He began educating the youth in the villages and training them in special camps. During this period of deliberation, this hero drew a war plan that was the first of its kind in the history of global warfare, known as the Qassamite Organization, which was structured as follows. The army's leader forms 5 group leaders, each of whom forms 5 additional leaders, and they are all led by him. Each group of 5 comprises 25 war chiefs, and it continues like this in the form of a pyramid. This organization is very intelligent, because if one cell of the organization collapses, it does not affect the rest, preventing the complete breakdown of the organization. Izz ad-Din al-Qassam transitioned to another stage, moving from preaching and incitement from the pulpit to the streets and conducting special operations. And this is a British document, written by an English intelligence officer named Barker on April 5, 1931, describing an armed operation that occurred in a Zionist settlement called Ahava Yajur. In the document, the officer states that the perpetrators of the operation were not identified, and he warns that the operation was well organized and quite astonishing. These operations continued, and al-Qassam also continued his role as an imam at the Haifa mosque. The occupation authorities knew nothing about him, other than the fact that he was just an imam in that mosque. However, in late 1932, on the borders of an area in Palestine known as Shomria, 20 Zionists and a British officer were eliminated, and the perpetrators of the operation were caught red-handed. Al-Qassam was also arrested as a suspected instigator of the operation. The strange thing is that the British did not yet know that the man they arrested was actually their leader. The perpetrators of the operation were executed, but Izz ad-Din al-Qassam was acquitted. After that, he decided to temporarily suspend all operations because the British authorities had focused their eyes on him. Then came the year 1933, when German authorities started persecuting the Jews, blaming them for Germany's defeat in the World War that had ended in 1918. As a result, thousands of Zionists began migrating to Palestine until 1935, when approximately 62,000 Zionists had entered the region. Al-Qassam and his followers had their eyes on everything that was happening, and during this migration, they noticed the entry of British cement barrels into Palestine. However, in reality, these were not just cement barrels but containers loaded with instruments for the Zionists, in anticipation of any confrontation with the Palestinian people. At that moment, the leader, Izz ad-Din al-Qassam, made his final decision, announcing the emergence of the largest resistance Palestine had witnessed. On November 15, 1935, Izz ad-Din al-Qassam launched the first call of the Great Palestinian Revolution, which is historically known as al-Qassam Revolution, where the Palestinian people presented some of the most inspiring examples of determination and resistance.
ترمي كلها إلى تقسيم البلاد العربية ما بين الإنجليز والفرنسيين وإلى سرقة فلسطين من أيدي أبنائها. من يريد منكم الاستسلام فليفعل، أما أنا سنقاتلهم حتى الشهادة.
Izz ad-Din al-Qassam chose the region of Junin, high up in the mountains within a fortress called Yarbud, and ignited the spark of resistance against the British and Zionist occupation from there. In less than a month, the British pinpointed the location of al-Qassam through their spies in the region, specifically on Wednesday, November 20th, 1935, which marked the first open confrontation between the people and the occupation. After a period of fighting, only 10 of al-Qassam's followers remained, facing 400 British soldiers on the opposite side. The occupation army besieged them from all directions, and the battle on that day lasted for 4 continuous hours, with 11 fighters on al-Qassam's side and 400 soldiers on the occupation side. That battle concluded with the martyrdom of Izz-ad-Din al-Qassam, as he was hit by a bullet in the head, in this holy land, the sacred land of Palestine. You might be wondering, is this everything? Is this the end of the hero we are talking about? In reality, Izz-ad-Din al-Qassam did not end with his death. Rather, we should say that he began with his death. According to Palestinian accounts, more than 15 British soldiers died in the Battle of Yarbud, and this alone was enough to break the prestige of the British Empire, over which the sun never set. Despite British threats, Izz-ad-Din al-Qassam's funeral spanned 5 kilometers of crowds. With his burial, his name became a symbol of resistance throughout all of Palestine to this day. Just 5 months after his burial, the Great Palestinian Revolt reignited, drawing inspiration from this hero and following his path. It continued from 1936 to 1939, with relentless fighting against the occupation. Izz-ad-Din al-Qassam's name is written everywhere in Palestine to this day. Thus, his initial declaration, "It is not important for us to win. What's important is that we become a lesson for the nation and future generations," was realized on the ground. My dear friends, this was the story of the Islamic hero, Izz-ad-Din al-Qassam, who is considered the nation's gold and its wealth. The 400 soldiers who besieged and killed him all perished, but his name lives on. My final words, Izz-ad-Din al-Qassam embodies the practical meaning of the renowned saying, "If you strike, you must cause pain, for the outcome is one."